Dwight, welcome to Halloween Daily. Thanks so much for hanging out and talking to us today.
My pleasure. It's always fun to talk about all things Halloween.
That's us, all things Halloween, and I am excited for this conversation. Of course, I've been a huge Michael Myers fan forever, and we love Halloween 4 and so many of your other projects, and more recently, Natty Knocks. We've been talking about that a lot here at Halloween Daily News. We love that one as well. So I'm excited to talk to you about everything you've been working on and you've got coming up. But before we even get into your career, if it's all right, because every day's Halloween with us, we always like to start our origin story with some memories of the holiday itself, if that's all right. So can you flash us back to maybe growing up and times with your own family, just celebrating the holiday, if you did celebrate and do celebrate? What's Halloween like for you?
Well, I'm like, yeah, Mr. Childhood Halloween. I grew up in sort of middle-class suburbs of Cleveland. So by the time it came to October, it was cold, it was spooky, it was dark early. The houses were close together, but a little spread out. So they weren't close together like at Halloween 4. You had to travel a little farther. And so crossing the lawns and getting from door to door was actually pretty spooky. And we all did dress up and go out. It was very memorable. Everybody did their porches and did their driveways. And so I have a great Halloween memory. And then we had one neighbor, in the funny story category, who was tired of us throwing eggs at his windows and marking up his house. And one Halloween, he got up on his roof and he laid in wait with the garden hose with one of those power wash things. And he waited for us because he knew we were coming. And we did. We hit his windows with the eggs, and we were putting up the stuff in his trees, the toilet paper in the trees, which is in Halloween 4. And then he proceeded to hose us down with this garden hose. And this was like a 48-year-old man. And I got to give him credit. It was a great counterattack, and he earned it.
He earned it. Yeah, it sounds like he put up with it enough, and yeah, he was ready to fight back.
He was ready to fight back, and he did, and good for him. But so Halloween was, I don't know, I probably, what ages, maybe 8 to 12 is the target years when I probably went out maybe 4 seasons, maybe once again with my brothers. But there was that sweet spot where it was awesome. So I was in a great place to enjoy Halloween.
That's awesome. That does sound very fun and nostalgic. And yeah, I love hearing the neighbor that he finally had it that one year, knew you guys were coming. I love that. We also always love to ask everybody what your favorite Halloween costume is that you've worn over the years, and also your favorite Halloween candy.
Snickers that's the easiest one
That's
for me.
easy, yeah.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer. But the whole thing was which house had the big bars. That was the thing. Some houses had little candies, and then some houses had the big Hershey's, the big Snickers. So it was all about size matters. It was all about that. And in terms of costume, I'm trying to remember. I think I did go as a full-on zombie one year, but it all broke down to the mask. I found that the mask that you suffocated in was not fun. And the mask that was really simple, maybe just like a Lone Ranger, like just something on the eyes, but like would leave, it was cold, we were running, so you needed air. And so I didn't like the big rubber full pull downs because I couldn't move and I couldn't see. So there's a practical answer to what costume really works. So I do remember things that were about the eyes, like maybe Lone Ranger masks or that kind of thing.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. The practicality of it, like you said, you can breathe a little bit better. You can be on the run if you got to run from angry neighbors with the
That's
hose
right.
or whatever.
You have to be on your feet.
Awesome. Um, when did you know that you were going to be a filmmaker? Was it something you were interested in at a young age, or when
Yeah,
did this
like
begin for you?
eighth grade. I was
Okay.
earlier. I was early in, and I had been kind of talking a little bit about, oh, I'm kind of interested in the movies. We had a class in seventh grade at my school. We had this quirky weirdo professor who played us strange movies we weren't meant to see, like The Pawnbroker and The Hill and The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner. These were black and white art films from that period. And they really stirred my imagination. The parents were kind of like they are now. The parents were all up in arms about it because the content was too adult, supposedly. But it sort of got my interest. And then I have to give my credit to my father because at that time you could buy these little Instamatic Super 8 cameras, and they had a fixed lens, no zoom. It was just on off. You put in a cartridge. They were very inexpensive. They were like an Instamatic camera, only for Super 8. And so I got one of those for Christmas, and I just shot everything that I could afford. The fun part was you took the 50-foot thing to the drugstore, and then it would take 3 or 4 days to get the film back. And then you would project it on the wall in your bedroom and see what you got. So I think it was a combination of seeing films that were outside of what you might just see in the movies. These were these are English art films, and not all English, but some of the more, the edgier stuff of that period. Interesting.
That is interesting. That was your really the turning point and the awakening moment for you. At like you said, at a young age where a lot of people still don't know exactly where they're going, but you got a clear direction at that point. It sounds like.
I did. I was lucky that way because
Yeah.
I got focused early, and then learned how to splice together. I learned, and by the time I was in my junior year of high school, I did win a couple local film festivals and got my interest. And then I got turned down by a lot of the major film schools. I was kind of angry about it because a lot of the good film schools. But then at the last minute, I got into USC at the very last minute. Now remember at that time, not very few people went to film school. It was almost unheard of. I mean, today, I don't know where are you right now? What part of the world?
We're in North Carolina, all the way on the East Coast,
Well,
place called the Outer Banks.
you have a great film school
Yeah.
out there,
Hmm.
and most states and cities do. At that time, it was NYU, USC, UCLA was actually the big one at that time. I got turned down at Northwestern, a couple others. But when I got into USC, that was a big opportunity for me. And the reason I got accepted was because I had won a couple film festivals, and I think that made a difference to them. So then I was doubly lucky because by going to USC, I didn't know anybody in Hollywood, or I had no family in the business, or there wasn't even a third cousin or somebody. So I was starting from scratch. But when I went to film school, I met a lot of people that kind of were adjacent to the business. And so it was a way, at least into Los Angeles, because it's hard to do. You just parachute in, and you don't know anybody. So that was my origin story. It was Super 8 films and then film school.
And then that just led right into it. Like you said, you made some connections there. I guess that would lead into your first feature films, and one of the earliest. I know it wasn't your first, but in Halloween 4, that's pretty early on in your career, right?
It was. I will take 1 second here
Hmm.
to plug a book that I wrote called Still Rolling Inside the Hollywood Dream Factory.
Sure.
because that book really details, I wrote it for film students who are interested in getting into the business. And it really details the journey from film school to that first film.
Yeah.
It's rocky and it's unpredictable. And so this book details that going from independent films to studio movies and then from studio movies to television. And I sort of lay this whole thing out. It's from McFarlane Publishers, and McFarlane has a very nice uh, catalog of books about film and filmmaking. So, you know, for any of your viewers who are interested either in my story or in how you get their story, I think that'll be a fun read for them. That's
Well,
my plug still, really.
yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, we'll put a link down when we have this interview up to the where they can get the book, because yeah, I think a lot of people will want to check that out, especially like you said, aspiring filmmakers that want to make that transition. Um so before you got Halloween 4, I'm curious, how aware were you of the previous films, of the Michael Myers character? Were you a fan at all of any of that, or had you seen
Well,
any
I
of
was
them
a
before?
big fan of Halloween because John Carpenter was ahead of me at USC, so he was kind of looked up to as a demigod because he was somebody who had made it. And I'm trying to think when The Fog came out. Do you remember when his Fog came
I
out?
think it was that 1980, I think.
Maybe, yeah, but
I think it might have
so
been.
this would be after I was out of film school, but Halloween, the first one was
Hmm.
so evocative, I felt, of my childhood, even though he shot that in Pasadena. Um, those streets and Laurie Strode's life and I loved Halloween 1 as most people do. You couldn't help but I mean Donald Pleasance, truly the heartbeat of this whole franchise. And we can talk about Michael, we can talk about Laurie Strode and all that, but and I was, gifted because Halloween 4 we had Donald there. And Loomis gives you the perspective that just is so invaluable in my view. And so, but The Fog, I loved The Fog, which was Carpenter's maybe his movie right after Halloween, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think
You know,
so.
Hal Holbrook and John Houseman
Yeah.
and Adrienne Barbeau as the DJ in that lonely California town. It's just so atmospheric. So I'm trying to answer your question. I was aware of Halloween and Michael, but because I was aware of John Carpenter and I was aware of him because of USC.
So at the point when you got hired for Halloween 4, where were you in that journey of your career then? I mean, had you started to make other studio type films, or were you still kind of in
Well,
the independent area?
there was an interesting explosion around 82, 83 when the VHS machine
Yeah.
finally landed in people's living rooms. And there was suddenly this demand for what they call it product then, they call it content now, something to feed this hungry beast. And by the time I did Halloween 4, I had actually made 3 films, feature films.
Okay.
The first one I made for an indie producer named Sandy Howard, a classic B movie. He had famously done A Man Called Horse, Vice Squad, Suburbia. He was a B movie producer, old school, like a Corman or an Arkoff.
Hmm.
And Sandy gave me a chance with my first, it was a spy movie with Sally Kellerman. And then that got me another action adventure, low budget movie with Joe Don Baker and Edward Albert. We were down in Texas. It was called Getting Even. And that was a fascinating and challenging experience for me. And then that got me, I was chasing the money. Wherever I got an opportunity, there was money. Like, the Getting Even was all Texas oil money. And then the next one I did called Bloodstone, I shot in India, and that was kind of blocked Indian money that they wanted to, not, I mean, launder is too harsh a term, but they wanted to turn some of that local rupee money into dollars. And so suddenly they were going to finance this movie. So I made a movie, a feature film. It was basically Raiders of the Romancing the Stone kind of knockoff with a famous Indian actor named Rajnikant, who is now a huge politician. And the producer of that movie, Ashok Amritraj, went on to create Hyde Park Entertainment, which became a Hollywood production company. So a lot of those people, and it was the great Nico Mastorakis was the producer. I don't know if you've ever heard that name, but he was a prolific B-movie producer at that time. So there was a lot of that going on. It doesn't exist now. None of that exists in today's world. There is no Sam Arkoff. There's no Roger Corman. These were guys who could make a decision in the room, right? They didn't have to get it cleared with anybody because they were all their own bosses. They were the head of the studio. They were the big guy. So, and I do think for young filmmakers, that's a tough thing to lose because it's very corporate now. If you're dealing with Amazon or Hulu or Netflix or pick one, any of those, that's corporate. And there isn't that seat of the pants. Even the smaller companies like A24 is a studio now, essentially. So it's a little harder to, I think, get that first grungy indie under your belt, with a couple B movie names. Anyway, I was fortunate that way. And so Mustafa, just to finish your question, the Mustafa Akkad, the godfather of the Halloween movies, wanted to shoot a movie in India because he was a very accomplished director, as you probably know. Lion of the Desert and those Anthony Quinn movies. And he had heard that I had made a movie in India, and he wanted to pick my brain.
Okay.
And so that was my Trojan horse to get in the door and to meet him. And they were fishing around for a director for Halloween 4. There had been a famous split between Deborah Hill and John Carpenter, who I've never met, by the way. And there was a famous split, and Mustafa decided to buy out all the rights and go on and make Halloween 4 because John's plan was to do an anthology where every Halloween would be, like Season of the Witch, like every Halloween would be a different story.
Yeah.
And Mustafa just wanted Michael. I mean, he just didn't care how he got him. He wanted Michael. And of course, he was burned and blown up at the end of 2. And the great writer, my partner, Alan McElroy, and I came up with a way to bring, to do whatever we could to plausibly bring Michael back. Because Mustafa was like, there is no Halloween without Michael. And of course, he's right.
Yeah.
There really isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was such a big deal at the time because, like you said, it had been a long time since Halloween 3. And of course, that one, everybody was like, where's Michael? Now people appreciate it for what it is. But at the time, it was, it had crashed and burned, basically. And the franchise was kind of over for a while for most of the 80s.
Oh, a long while. Well, people were disappointed. Let's see, we got to Halloween 4 in 88.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when Season of the Witch came out, but it had been a minute for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it had been 10 years since 2. I know that. Because that's in the movie. We talk about that 10 years ago, there was this fire and all that. But Season of the Witch, I just think the fans were looking for Michael and they didn't get him.
Exactly. And so this time Mustafa knew, like you said, there is no Halloween without Michael. We're bringing him back. And then it's in the title, The Return of Michael Myers. So you mentioned you worked with Alan on the script. I was curious about that, how much of the story was already there and how much once you got involved, you were part of, like, kind of finessing.
Well, they had a whole treatment when I got there. And I read the treatment, and I went in to see Mustafa after I read it. And again, now this is me just on my own right now. I was, however, working on a script on spec with Alan. So I was sort of saying to Alan on the phone, Jesus, I'm going in to meet with the Halloween people. And he couldn't believe it. He's like, because since he was a kid, he was a Halloween. He's also from Cleveland, by the way. So I said, Mustafa, I really want to do this, but I'm not interested in this treatment at all. And it was basically, which was pretty arrogant for a young filmmaker, honestly. But it was a bunch of horny kids being slaughtered by Michael, and it was like, we'd had Terror Train and Prom Night, and there was a carnival of horror slashers, various Fridays and various Nightmares,
Yep.
and other knockoffs, through that period. And I thought, well, it's just not good enough for a Halloween movie.
Right.
And I pitched him basically what I call, it was like, to me, it was a Silence of the Lambs kind of police procedural. It was a thriller more than a slasher. You have an escaped convict who gets loose, heads to a small town to find a victim and kill them. And there's this detective on his trail. And in our case, I turned Loomis essentially into a detective. I mean, even though he's the psychiatrist or whatever he is, I turned him into a detective. And so then I went to Alan. I said, we have to come up with this as a police procedural. Because I think then, sure, it's going to have kills and it's going to have scares, but we'll make it really different. And I think that was the key to Halloween 4. And Mustafa went along with it. He didn't want to, but he really was under the gun because there was a writer's strike coming up. We had to start prep right away. There was no script. And he said to Alan and I, if you can get me a script by, I think it was April 1st, and this was late February, we can go, but it has to be right away. So Alan and I worked on the story together. He wrote the screenplay, and his first draft, I do talk about this at length in the book, his first draft was shootable. I mean, it was that good. Now we worked on, based on the locations, but he just delivered a fantastic first draft. And so because we had to get it out by October, which means we had to be locked by the end of August, because, you have all the prints and the lab work and the organizing the distribution and the marketing. So to make a mid-October release, you have to be finished, 8 weeks at minimum earlier, ideally more. So we shot it, cut it, posted it, mixed it, scored it very quickly.
Man. And you said that his first actual screenplay was shootable and yeah, didn't even require a whole lot of more work after that, it sounds like. And I've listened to the commentary tracks and all that over the years, and he is a fan, and he talks about being so excited to work on it and to bring this character and some of these other characters back.
Well, he knows his stuff, really.
Yeah.
And he created that great scene when Loomis gets picked up by the prophet.
Yes.
Reverend Sayer. And that's a scene you don't expect in a Halloween movie.
Right.
It's just about evil and hunting and, the Bible and curses, and Donald's listening to this guy like he's batshit crazy. But we know that Loomis kind of knows he's right. It was a very, I don't know, just kind of set up a weird tone for the whole movie. And when I say weird, I mean weird in a great way.
Weird in a great way, sure, yeah, and very atmospheric. You used that term earlier, and I mean H4. Everybody loves it because it is one of the most atmospheric of all the sequels. I think
Well, that's my childhood. I really reproduced those streets and the the drugstore and the main street. Well, now we were in Salt Lake City, but I knew exactly how to production design all that. And again, I was really able to bring those 4 years of trick-or-treating you know, when they go up to the cop's daughter door and she's hanging out with Brady,
Yeah.
and then we put in this whole soap opera with, you know, the babysitter and the boyfriend, and made those characters seem like they had more to do than just get killed. They were having an actual life, which, you know, and I mean, I think everybody knows at this point the miracle of Danielle Harris as Jamie Lloyd. And there's a long story about that in terms of casting, also in the book. Ellie Cornell was absolutely great in her part. And then once you had those two sisters, you had the emotional core
Hmm.
of the movie. So we were, yes, we wanted to deliver scares for sure. But we had big ambitions for that movie. We were trying to do, I don't want to say a studio movie, but we were trying to do a prestige thriller out of a Halloween movie. That was our ambition, honestly.
Yeah.
And by the way, it did not, it landed commercially. Mustafa made money. I mean, it was a box office success. But the critics kicked us in the teeth roundly and solidly for years on that movie because they didn't get it.
Right.
And they just didn't understand what Alan and I were trying to do because they had different expectations. You know, it's always about more kills, more gore. You know, the kills aren't this enough or that. I get, you know, but then what happens is that movie settles in. You know, it's on AMC every year, you know, it kind of relives. And oh my God, people just adore it now.
Yeah.
They just love it. So I don't know whether that's just time or expectation. But I have to say, no one loved us when we came out, except fans. I mean, people bought tickets,
Yeah.
and that, you know, of course, then they wanted to make five right away.
Um, I do love that scene with Reverend Sayer, and like you said, it's so unique and just one of the weird scenes in the film, that weird in a great way, that talks about a bigger evil and a bigger theme, you know, even than what we're seeing in Michael in this story. And there's hints of that in some of the other films, and I always kind of like that stuff where it's not really defined and they don't have to explain it. It's just kind of these hints. And another sequence that I love, and fans, everybody talks about it, is that cool opening sequence of the opening credits, and just that setting the atmosphere and the mood. And it doesn't start with Carpenter's theme like so many of the others do. It starts just very quiet, and it's just one of the coolest parts.
We didn't do that push in
Right, right.
on the jack lantern, and I got a lot of flack for that because they said, "Well, that's the signature of the film." And first of all, credit to Mustafa for allowing me to step out of the
Yeah.
formula a little bit. I don't know why he did, but bless his heart that he did. I was actually in a quandary because I thought, well, what is Halloween really?
Yeah.
And I knew it from my own childhood. I knew what the candy and the tricks and the pranks, and I knew that part of Halloween, but I didn't really know. So I did research about the holiday, you know, and then you go back and you find those Scottish roots in the agrarian farm country, and then all the way back to the old country where it was right at the end of the harvest season. The darkness of winter was coming. People are scared to death of those long winter nights. They don't know if they have enough food to get them through the winter. There's just this tremendous sense of foreboding. And I kept looking at these photos from, you know, the 1890s and in New England, fields and scarecrows and fallen tractors. And I said, oh my God, this is Halloween, right? This is Halloween. So I stole all these public domain, you know, ideas. And I went out in the fields outside of Salt Lake City, and it was spring in Salt Lake, but it was very gloomy. It was oddly, so spring in Utah kind of looked like fall in New England, and, you know, with those gray skies.
Mm-hmm.
And I took the production team out there, and we built some of, you know, like the shed and the tractor
Yeah.
and the scarecrow with I saw one scare. Everybody's done a scarecrow, but this one I saw in a book from maybe 1900s, and he had gloves on his hand. I've never seen that.
Yeah.
Someone put gloves. So these little funny details, and I just put it in the title sequence. And now, as you've just mentioned, people, it's memorable to people.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of the most talked about parts among the fandom, and everybody just loves that, and because it is so different. We're used to, like you said, seeing the opening from the first two and just hearing the theme, and but this takes its time and it eases us back into it, which I think is kind of cool because it was the return of Michael Myers and getting back into that, but it kind of eased into it in a way that I thought was really cool coming, all these years later, a decade roughly after Halloween 3.
Yeah, I didn't want to just do the pumpkin, although I do think it's great, by the way.
Sure, yeah,
But but I just thought, well, if we're going to reintroduce Michael,
sure.
maybe there is another way, that
Yeah.
would be interesting.
And
So
yeah,
I was just going to say, sometimes as a young filmmaker, it's hard to ask for things because people want the formula. Of course they're selling Halloween, and it's like if you're going to do a Bond movie, you're going to have a Bond title sequence, right? That's a given.
yeah,
But I was able to explain to Mustafa that it was that. It was just that slightly different.
yeah. And again, like you said, respect to Mustafa for giving you some freedom to do something a little bit different there, where he could have just put his foot down and said, "Oh
Oh,
no, we're
easily.
doing a pumpkin."
Yeah, no, he could have just said, "No, you're shooting the pumpkin," and of course I would have done it because it's his, it's his bat and ball, and he can take it and go home if he wants.
Sure. And you mentioned how Donald, of course, is the heart and soul of these films, and Loomis brings so much gravity to it. And can you talk just a little bit about working with him? Because I mean, we all just love him, and in Halloween 4 especially, it's really an interesting point in Loomis where he well, it's just a great performance. It's classic
Well,
Loomis to me.
I was a little intimidated because
Yeah,
I this was Donald Pleasance
yeah,
from Great Escape,
yeah,
James Garner and Steve McQueen, and what did he play in the Bond Blofeld or
yep.
some? It's like it was Donald Pleasance, and I had worked at that time with some stars, Joe Don Baker, Sally Kellerman, people
Hmm.
like that, but I don't know. I was a little intimidated, and then when I finally got to meet him, I was put at ease because he's an actor. More all these guys and ladies, they're actors, and they want to be directed. Most of them, a lot of young filmmakers get intimidated, and they just want to let the actor do whatever they want, so that
Yeah,
they don't have any conflict. But the reason that's counterintuitive is because most actors want input. And oddly enough, they want the conflict. And this is what you have to understand. The conflict isn't bad. Like if you say, I see the scene this way, and the actor says, well, I know that's ridiculous. I didn't prepare it that way. I would do it this way. Okay, but here's my ideas. And then and then you get into, as long as it's done with respect, it creates maybe a third thing. But I watch all these young directors and they're so intimidated because here comes the movie star, the TV star, whatever, and suddenly, okay, that's great. Yeah, what you're doing is great because they want to be friends or they don't want to get in trouble.
right.
But that isn't always the way to go. But so I didn't ever have arguments with Donald, but I had certainly creative discussions
Hmm.
about what we were doing with the scene, and he enjoyed that. It gets his juices flowing. And the only thing about Donald was I had to get adjusted to is he was an older man by then,
Hmm.
uh, and he was good. I found very quickly he had about 6 hours in him
Okay.
of good work,
Yeah.
and after 6 hours, he started to get really grumpy. And I've run into this with other actors too. And then if you push it after 7 or 8 hours, he was just a disagreeable person. He was tired, didn't want to be there. Also, he enjoyed his end of the day libation. I mean, he needed to get a drink, and that's fine. You know, he's
Yeah.
entitled to have a drink. I don't think he was an alcoholic, but
Right.
he
Right.
he wanted, you know, he was looking forward to that drink at the end of the day. And well, he's British, you know, he just had to have his drink.
Yeah.
And so what I did, I scheduled the production board with the AD so that we would get him for a good 6 hours and let him go, and then
Hmm.
have other work to do with other cast and so forth, if we could, you know, based on
Hmm.
locations and all that. And try, and I did the exact same thing with Joe Don Baker, where he would show up at 7. Well, let's say his call time was at 7, he'd drift in before 8. But you did not plan a shot before 11 with him. There was just no way he was
Yeah.
coming out until 11. And it was silly to fight it, you know, and knock and pound on his door and make a fuss because, you know, he was hungover. He wasn't coming out. And then finally, you know, about 11, he'd come out, and then he was ready.
Yeah.
And you get 5 hours of work. Same with Wesley Snipes, by the way, getting into more important,
Yeah.
you know, movie star kind of actors.
Hmm.
Same thing. It's like there's a, I don't know, there's a focus that holds up.
Hmm.
Then when they get tired, it's almost counterproductive. So anyway, I loved working with him. He's a great actor, and it was a highlight of my early career for sure.
And it sounds like what you're saying is that's all part of the deal of being the director sometimes is finding, knowing these actors, knowing, okay, we're going to have to adapt a little bit to them. And it's not, you know, that's just part of the gig is like finding the way to let them do what they do best.
Get the best out of. I do have one good performance story with Donald, and that is at
Okay.
the end. You know, the famous reveal of Jamie at the top of the stairs.
Oh, I love that.
And you know, Donald had prepared that in his own mind, and you know, he came with something prepared, and we set it up, and we shot one, and we shot another one. And his thing was he was scared to death because the moment was so big. He was scared of overdoing it and being over the top. And so he did a performance that was very subdued. It was a quiet kind of shock, and the quiet hurt. And I'm watching this over and over again, maybe 3 takes, over and over, maybe 3 takes. And I just felt like this wasn't it. And I went to him and I said, Donald, I think we can do more. I think this scene, we can allow ourselves to do more. And he says, well, you're going to be over the top. It's going to ham it up. And I did an old director trick, which I'm sure he knew. He was way too experienced not to know. But I said, look, let's do one and I'll have it. And then we'll cut it in and see if it works. You'll come to the cutting room or I'll send it to you and you'll look at it and you'll tell me. But let's have it, because if we leave here tonight without it, we'll never have it. He says, well, like what? I said, like, go over the top. Do it too big. Let it go. Just let the air out. So we lined up the cameras and he came in and he did that's in the movie. You know, he goes, no, and he's just freaking out. And when you see Loomis freak out, it makes the moment on the stairs even more horrendous. And there's an example where I earned my money that night because that was the right note, and the scene allowed it. But by that time, Donald, I mean, he trusted me to know that I was thinking about the movie. I wasn't thinking about, you know, just my ego or forcing. I was thinking about the movie. But man, and that was it, cut, you know, just we're not doing that again. We had it cut, that's it. But it's incredible, as you know.
Yeah.
It's not just Jamie, it's how he reacts to that.
Absolutely. I've even said those words that, yeah, I mean, it's what we see Jamie and all of that callback to the first film, but it's Loomis's reaction that makes. I mean, the hair is standing up just thinking about it now. I've
Yeah.
seen it so many times. It's you know, I always say it's probably the best ending other than the 78 film, the original ending.
Right.
It's probably my second favorite ending of all the films because it's just, and like you said, that was the right note for that moment. Because we hear him crack and you just hear it that Loomis is like, how is this happening all over again? A minute ago, he thought it was over. It was finally over. It's finally done. And here it's not over. It started all
Yeah,
over again.
it's speaking of the 78 film, it's hard to work in Carpenter's shadow, you know, because he made almost a perfect movie.
Yeah.
And you know, because Laurie Strode is perfect and Loomis and the town and the ending as you talked about, and Michael, he made, you know, a great movie. And he's a man who's in his 70s now, and people still want to talk to him about Halloween. I think he's flattered, but he's also very frustrated, you know, because he's made 20 movies, you know, since, and some very good ones, but that, you know, that still just sticks.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely lightning in a bottle, as they say, and just
Right,
one of those masterpieces that can't be replicated or really competed with.
right, that's right.
And started a whole subgenre of slashers and holiday themed horror and just all of that.
Absolutely. There were many holidays that got the treatment. Just
Absolutely.
last year, there was a Thanksgiving movie, which I haven't seen.
Yeah.
They did one about Thanksgiving.
Oh yeah. They'll get to all of them eventually if they haven't
Yeah.
already. And I know you mentioned it a minute ago, and you said you go in depth in the book, but I did want to ask you about casting Danielle. Of course, we're all huge fans. She's so cool. She's so great. We were fortunate enough to have her on here a few years
Great.
ago, and you know she loves you and credits you for discovering her and then for hiring her again, now more than once later in her career.
Right.
And she's like, everybody said they would do that, but Dwight's the only one that actually followed through and did that. So she loves you and we love her. Can you talk to us just a little bit about finding her out of, I guess it was an audition process, probably a lot of.
Well, we tried here in Los Angeles first, and we read a lot of both for Ellie's part, Rachel and Jamie. And we had a lot of not open, but you know, proper casting sessions in LA. And I was frustrated because there were people that were good and some people that were fine, but it wasn't. I don't know. Here's the thing in LA: the younger people, Jamie's age, have only done commercials generally, or they've done what was then the equivalent of Disney things, you know, where everything is up and perky and you know, you're selling a product or so everybody's kind of phony, honestly. It's not their fault. Their mothers have been telling them to you know, to just do that all the time, and their agents, and so you get kind of an LA commercial thing. And then the Rachels that came in were all like glamorous. You know, they were 18 going on, you know, 28. They all seemed very sophisticated. Some of them were New Yorkers, you know, and I didn't feel the vulnerability. I mean, beautiful, some of them talented without doubt, but they didn't feel like Haddonfield, Illinois to me, because they weren't, you know. They're from LA and New York, basically. So I said to Mustafa, I said, do you think I could go look in New York to look at a different pool of people? And he looked at me like he's crazy, like I was crazy. But again, to his credit, instead of fighting me, he said, okay, let me get you a casting director. I'll fly you out, just you. We'll put a session together in New York. And I couldn't believe he said yes, but he did. So I went out, and about, as I remember, the third or fourth girl in was Danielle Harris. And I think she was 9. She was playing much younger, but she was a little older. You know, she was short. She had that young face, so she was very believable. But I knew when she came into the room that it was that she was the one. Of course, I read her, and did the scenes, but I didn't have to, and I can't explain what that is. It's just the face, the eyes, the way she carried herself,
Hmm.
how smart she was. It was just like, oh my God, this is why I came to New York. Um, and then, Ellie's from back east too, Ellie Cornell. And we did a screen test with an LA actress and Ellie Cornell. And it was the same thing. It was like she, obviously she's a pretty girl, but she's approachable. If you know what I mean. She's not unapproachable, and she's not in the same glamorous way that would be like, oh, I can't talk to, I can't talk to Bo Derek. Bo Derek's a 10. It's like you
Right.
can talk to Ellie Cornell.
Yeah.
And anyway, so between the two of them, I did get this kind of East Coast energy,
Hmm.
which I think was right for that movie.
Definitely. And again, they've both been the characters, and of course, the actresses that play them have been fan favorites ever since, and just beloved by this fan community and just the genre community in general. Um, of course, everybody obsesses over the mask, Michael's mask in all of the films. It's always different. And I'm curious how much discussion, debate went into the mask in Halloween 4 and how it was ultimately designed.
Well, the reason this comes up, I think I can explain it in a helpful way, is that Al and I wanted to make very sure that everything that happened felt organic.
Yeah.
In other words, when he breaks out of the ambulance, he kills the two attendants in there, with that famous dumb scene,
Hmm.
which is very clever, by the way.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's a very simple, old-fashioned gag. It's just a retractable thumb, and it looks like some big CGI effect. It's not. It's the simplest trick in the world. When you were a kid, you had a knife, the
Sure.
retractable.
Yep. Yep.
It's the same idea. Anyway,
That's great.
so now he's gone, he's missing. And so what do we have to do? We have to go to the gas station, we have to get the overalls. So
Yep.
we have to kill that guy. Then I have to take down the power in Haddonfield. So we had to blow up the phone lines. And then eventually we had to take out the actual electric power. So we had to throw Bucky into the transforming station.
Another classic scene.
Yeah, so
Oh,
but all these things had a reason, right?
yeah.
They're not just kills for no reason.
Right.
And then, of course, we had to get Michael's mask back. And so we thought, okay, it's been 10 years by now. He's become like a local boogeyman. And the drugstore is going to have Michael masks. Like he's the scary thing in town. It's Halloween time. People have these masks. So, and there's, of course, a scene where he shows up, terrifies the little girl. Of course, there was another opportunity for us to get the clown outfit for
Yes.
Jamie, which she finds herself, with this weird psychic connection.
Hmm.
And then Michael's image is shattered in the mirror. But so the mask was a commercial mask that kids would wear on Halloween night. So that's why it's not a designed movie mask. I think the masks
Right.
they did in these later films, I mean, they are astonishing and they're creepy, like these last three, you know,
Yeah.
films. I mean, it is a real horror mask and
Yeah.
beautifully designed, but that's not what we were doing because he wasn't a
Right.
designed Michael. He was an escaped convict that was slowly putting himself back together.
Hmm.
And because of that, the mask itself is maybe not as slick as as a Hollywood designer, would do a
Right.
movie mask. And so people think, well, the mask isn't right. Well, but it's not it's like it's a dime store mask. So that's one thing. I mean, maybe we overthought that, but that's why. And then the second question is about the one in the hallway, and that was That's literally a mistake because it was 3 in the morning and something happened with the mask. It was torn or fell off or broken in some way. And if we didn't shoot that shot, we were going to lose the whole night. And they said, go back to the prop truck and get the other. There's a mask people wear to line up the shots,
Hmm.
and we threw that mask on to get the shot. And I thought it was maybe going to be a little more out of focus, but it's the hair that's wrong.
Right, right.
And so people see that, but that was literally just a mistake. I mean,
Mhm.
it was, we could have gone back and reshot it. But we just didn't have the time and the resource to do it. So if I could have a shot back, I'd have that one back and I would do it with the right mask. But the original mask, the one that's on there, is on because Mike was rebuilding himself.
Yes. Yeah, and I even like his look when he gets right out of the hospital, when it's kind of the mummy bandage wrapped look. I always like that as just an alternate look, that you don't see in any of the other films. And I think that's kind of cool when he spends a few minutes in the film just wearing the coveralls and still without his mask. It's kind of just a weird, another cool
He's
H4
wrapped,
moment that you don't get.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
wrapped in gauze. When Loomis first sees him, he's
Yes.
wrapped in gauze.
And you mentioned that scene where the hair is different, because I did always wonder, what was up with that. But you say it's a mistake, but now we could just add to the lore and assume maybe that's like Ben Tramer or some other, a cult of Michael Myers, something in the mythology that we just don't know about.
That's right. We can just own the mistake.
That's it. That's it. Exactly. And you said that'd be the one thing that you change. I was gonna ask you that if you could go back now, is there anything from the film from H4 now, with knowing everything you know about just filmmaking and being in the business and Michael Myers, is there anything that you would change now other than that?
That's a really good question. Gosh, it's like the movie is of its time, right? If I went back now and put in steady cams and crane shots and
Right.
Luma cranes or what Technic cranes and did more movement and more cuts and whatever the style is now,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be right for that movie at that time. Like if you took a modern sensibility and shot that story, it wouldn't work. Part of what works about it is that it's very well, I'll say I feel it's very elegantly shot. It's not tricky,
Right.
but the camera's where it needs to be when it needs to be there, without overdressing it up. I did do a lot of subtle things which people may not know. For example, all the police cars, we put yellow in front of the headlights. I spoke to the DP about this and I said, I don't want it to be just any cop car on any night in any small town. I want this to be off. And
Mhm.
we came up with the idea of putting yellow gel inside the headlight. It's easy. They popped off. The plastic
Yeah.
popped off easily. And so it's not something you notice. But when you go back and look at the film again, you'll see that when the police car comes up the driveway or it's in the middle of the street, they have a yellow tone to it. And so I was always doing little details like that that I think make the movie feel a little different, not so much that you'd notice. But I have to say, I'm pretty happy with the movie as it stands.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with what you say. If you were to bring some of today into it, then yeah, it would take away from the of its time of it all, and that is it's very much a 1988 film and feels that way, and of course that's why people of that generation, have such a warm place for it in their heart. I think.
Well, you're supposed to be there in Haddonfield with those
Yeah.
characters. And I think that's why the performances were so important in the casting. It's not like, oh my God, did you see those cool ass shots he did with
Right.
imagine now everybody has 52 drone shots in their movies,
Yeah.
but for no reason. The reason the drone shots are in the movies is because they have one.
Just because they can. Yeah.
That's just because they can. And I just did an episode not that long ago of a TV show called 911, which is that rescue TV show.
Yeah.
And they were sort of one of the mandates of that show was you at the end of certain scenes you used a drone. And I was like, why? Well, that's the signature of the show. It's like, okay, well, I just work here. I'll get you a drone shot. But it's like you can't let the technology dictate what. Now, if there's a shot that's right for a drone shot, that's a great tool.
Mm-hmm.
But now you look at movies now, you'll see every young filmmaker has drone shots because they're cheap and they can send it up in the air. And it used to be you'd have to have a helicopter to get a shot like that. And sometimes they're beautiful. This shot of the car going down the road and the trees are on both sides and the drone follows it for half an hour. Everybody does that shot because it's easy.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be, my God, you'd have to have a helicopter and camera mounts and 2 pilots, and you'd have to have FAA clearance. And I've done a lot of helicopter work, but it was a whole thing. Now you can do it in an hour and a half.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. Yeah, you see it all the time. Was there ever any talk or discussion of you coming back to do Halloween 5?
Yes, a lot, actually.
Okay.
Mustafa pushed very hard and he was like, we need you back. And Alan and I had kind of set up, what we were going to do, because you see Michael collapse into the well and get shot and all that stuff. And they did. So I had never seen all of 5, but I know he did end up in a river or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in a quandary because, number one, I didn't want to be just the horror guy. I had other ambitions, to do other kinds of movies. And I felt like if I did another one, it would cement me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as gifted as somebody like, let's say one of the best, like M. Night Shyamalan is, as gifted as he is, you can't envision an M. Night Shyamalan romantic comedy or an M. Night Shyamalan relationship drama. Do you know what I mean? It's like if his name is going on the movie, it's going to have to be some kind of a supernatural thriller. It's his brand, right?
Right.
And so you can very quickly, I mean, it may be a good thing, you can become a very wealthy person, but if you get branded too early, then it's like, well, yeah, I know, but he's the horror guy. You hear that all the time.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to just do that. And I sort of finally decided that Halloween 4 worked. And I don't know, for most filmmakers, you'll find that when a movie works, it's like magic.
Mm-hmm.
And you weren't in control of all of it. That's why great directors make bad movies. It's not like they tried to make bad movies.
Right.
It's just sometimes they just don't work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, what if I do 5 and it's not as good? Then what? Then my legacy is not the one that worked. It's, oh, he ruined his own thing, So it was a complex decision. I decided to walk away. I was going to do an action movie, which was delayed. And then oddly enough, I ended up doing Phantom with Robert Englund, because that's the one that was the offer that became available to me. I was going to do a Steven Seagal movie, but the studio wouldn't let me do it, even though Steven wanted me, because I didn't have enough experience. And after Phantom, they had not been happy with the director on Hard to Kill. And then now I came back to do Marked for Death. So I had to wait a movie, but then they did have me back because they thought, oh, we should have had him in the first place. And Marked for Death was another one. It hit, it just punched all the boxes. The story worked. Steven was in his prime, and we had a magnificent bad guy. this Jamaican screwface who was just an insane bad guy. And that movie, did very, very well. So then, I'm the action martial arts guy. So then what do you get after that right away? Well, you get Rapid Fire with Brandon Lee, right?
Yeah.
Because now you're that guy. And then after that, I took an odd turn. That's another story into family films. But anyway, I was torn, and
Yeah.
I'd like to go back now. I'd love to go back now and make Halloween 5. Love to. I even talked at one time about couldn't we do Halloween 4 Part 2? Wouldn't that be fun? But they have their own plans for it now. They're doing a big TV series, and
Yes.
they have their own ideas.
Yes, yeah, they're working with Miramax now on a TV series. We know that, and we don't know where it's going. I guess I'll ask you now the obvious question everybody would want me to ask: have they contacted you about working on this series at all?
No, and I know Malik, and we have a good relationship, but I think it's next generation now. It's really next man up, because cultures change, styles change, approach changes. And I think my sort of Friedkin Coppola De Palma, the whole world that I came up with, all the great 70s movies. I don't know if that's what's happening right now. When you look at the A24, the Ari Aster, Heredity, and the kind of some of the horror stuff that's going on, it is different. I think Talk to Me is a little bit different. Those are a couple Australian, YouTubers, and they don't shoot the way Jonathan Demme shot Silence of the Lambs. They don't shoot that way. It's generation. It's normal. It's generational. But I have to be very honest to say, I'm not sure I understand it, because I'm a story and character guy. Like, that's my DNA.
Right.
And I think sometimes they're looking for more, I don't know, something. I don't know. How do you explain Heredity? I don't know. There are people that love that movie. It doesn't work for me, but it doesn't matter. People like whatever that is. And he made another. What was that one? Midsummer or Mid? I don't know how you say it. Which is a weird movie.
Yeah.
But is it? I don't know. I did think Talk to Me was awfully good.
Yeah.
And just because they took a relatively familiar idea, a relic, a haunted relic, but they made something fresh out of it. And I really kind of respected that. That was a good low budget horror film.
Yeah, there are some recent gems out there, but yeah, it's definitely a different world, and when you talk about A24, they do have kind of their own thing that they're doing that is a whole different vibe, and kind of either you love them or you hate them. A lot of them anyway. It's kind of one or the other, and
well, they did X, right? They did
yes,
X-rated or X or something.
X, yeah,
and then a sequel to that called Pearl.
Yep.
And they're very interesting films, but they're not John Carpenter, Brian De Palma movies. I don't know what they are. They're A24 movies. I don't know. I did like the one. What's the one where I should know the name, where she checks into a VRBO or an Airbnb, and there's a guy already there, the guy from It, and she goes down the beach.
Yeah.
What was the name of that?
Barbarian.
Yes. And I liked it because halfway through the movie they did this weird twist, and they cut to the Hollywood guy, and this whole completely different story. And then he comes into town and rejoins the main story. I thought Barbarian was pretty good.
Yeah, I like that one too.
So there are some good ones. I don't know about the one this weekend. I don't know about Abigail. Is anybody talking about that? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some good things. So I mean, I'm always up for a new vampire movie, and I'll probably check it out. But we'll see. Before we leave Haddonfield, though, and Halloween 4, I did want to ask because you said, well, I know I read your interview where you talked about what would be essentially a requel, Halloween 4 Part 2. So I want to hear a little bit about your idea for that. But you also mentioned that you and Alan originally had an idea for a follow up, or somewhat of an idea. So can you tell us both a little bit of what you and Alan might have originally done, and
Well, we're getting into tricky territory now
okay,
because, especially talking about the recall, because I got into a little bit of hot water about that because it's not really what they're going to do.
sure,
And
yeah,
my idea, because we have Danielle, because we have Ellie Cornell, I felt like there was, all these characters that could be great, to follow up on them,
yeah,
what they're doing as mature adults, and they have kids or whatever, and there's a way to really reboot the whole thing. Because they would both be great in a Halloween 4 Part 2, but that's not what Universal wants to do. So I should probably leave that alone. In terms of what 5 might have been,
hmm,
I mean, we were going to have him, down underground, and he was going to come back, and uh, you know, Jamie and Rachel were going to be a kind of ferocious freedom fighters now. And instead, because Alan's an action writer, as you probably know, he does
yeah,
action. And so we were going to really lean into the assault on Precinct 13,
nice,
guns and ammo part of it. If you look at Rapid Fire,
hmm,
it is a massive guns and ammo movie. We have a fortress shootout at a Chicago restaurant. It's just, insane with Brandon and Powers Booth. And so I think we wanted I guess a war, like an action movie war,
hmm,
where Michael comes back and they have to defend the town, and that's what I remember.
hmm.
We just thought it would be so badass to see them like freaking armed to the teeth and hunting him down,
Oh, that
like
would have been,
turning the tables on Michael.
yeah,
They're older and they're pissed off. And I we weren't gonna do we were gonna send out, I think about it, we were gonna send Danielle to some therapy,
hmm,
or Jamie, and have her go through a very short, because we didn't have a lot of time, short exorcism,
yeah,
to get the demon out.
okay,
I think we were literally just going to do an exorcism,
hmm,
get Michael's demon out of her, and then then Michael's out, and he's out physically, and also he's out, and then we were going to have a real violent, bloody B movie version of it, which would have been fun as hell. But
yeah.
Escape from New York as a Halloween movie.
Oh man. Well, see, I love the idea of that. That sounds exciting, and would have been just a total different treatment of what they did do with the characters in Halloween 5. But yeah, that sounds like it would have been
Well,
awesome.
because they were victims all through Halloween 4.
Yeah.
They're being chased around. They're always victims, and we did have to deal with the fact that Danielle was possessed, but to have them turn the tables on Michael
Yeah.
Myers and come after him, I just thought was so awesome.
Yeah.
But
What meant to be, I guess. But yeah, what could have been. Now we can all, fan fiction in our
yeah,
eye, in our minds, just kind of in our mind's eye, see it. Awesome. And then two projects that you've mentioned are already, pretty soon after that. But one is your Phantom of the Opera with, of course, Robert Englund,
right.
and this was you again, stepping into maybe even more iconic territory than Michael in Halloween with Phantom of the Opera, a remake of a classic Universal picture, and Robert, of course, at the height of his Freddy fandom right at that moment too. Um, so can you talk just a little bit about that project and what that was like? Again, tackling a character that's been around for just
Well,
decades.
yeah, and again, it's very clearly detailed in the book, but I think when I went to meet with Menachem Golan, who was at that time the head of Canon, and well, he had split off from Canon, but they had made many movies, and he had Robert tied up in a deal to do the Phantom. It was like he had already booked him, and
Okay.
he had these stages in Budapest that he owned. So he had a script. It was the same scenario as I had with Mustafa, where he gave me the script,
Hmm.
and it was like an old Herbert Law Hammer movie. It was kind of creaky and it was serviceable, but it wasn't very fresh. And so I had this writer I'd been working with on a Sam Markoff movie named Duke Sandifer. I said, Duke, what can we do with this, to sort of make it freshen it up? And he has a twisted ass great mind. But he said, what if it was, I think it was the original idea. What if the Phantom's making a horror movie, right? The flesh of his victims is what he uses to make his mask. And I said, wait, what? And he said, no, he's going to take and he's going to sew the skin of his victims onto his face. And that's going to be the mask of the Phantom, not that cute little, Lloyd Webber half a mask. It's going to be this grotesque, stitched, sewn in thing. And we went to Robert, and I think he was like, what are you guys talking about? And kind of we slowly got this great makeup and effects artist, Kevin Yeager, involved. And we got the Beethoven hair, and we gave him a prosthetic chin. And we created this, I don't know, this 19th century dandy. Also, we had to make it take place in England and not Paris, because the sets were all English sets. So it wasn't like it was a big creative decision. It was like, but then you think about it, well, why couldn't it take place in England? Like, why does
Yeah.
it have to be Paris?
Right.
But otherwise, Duke stayed very close to the book. We threw out the script. And I said, I said the same thing to Menachem. I don't want to make this. And he was terrified because he already had a deal with Robert, and we had to shoot. So he said, well, what do you want to do? And I told him, and he was horrified. But he needed to make this movie. He needed Phantom of the Opera with Robert Englund. Plus, he had the director of Halloween 4, which was a hit,
Yeah.
with a legit hit. So at that point, I had a little more leverage. We did the script, which is very ballsy and very out there, and just managed. We did this thing where we pissed off everybody, because the horror hounds, and I don't mean to call it hounds, how else do you say it? The horror fans,
Yeah.
were just kind of like, I don't get all this opera and all these wardrobe, and I'm in Europe, and it's all very, it's not my world, right?
Hmm.
It's not the grungy world of most horror movies. Are warehouses and industrial farms and Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes.
They're not generally in, opera houses.
Hmm.
And then the Lloyd Webber fans were like, what is this? You've got this psychotic guy killing people, and so everybody was kind of freaked out. It didn't do much business. But here's another interesting thing. That movie, over the last however long it's been, has achieved an amazing cult status. I get more letters and contacts about Phantom almost than anything. And it's the women, there are goth women who love this movie. They love the romance of it.
Hmm.
We were very lucky to get this young star from The Stepfather, Jill Schoelen,
Yeah. Yeah. She's
who
great.
had horror cred at that point off of The Stepfather.
Hmm.
who has a wonderful, innocent, wide eye, and she could sing. I mean, that's not her opera voice, but she did it all,
Yeah.
so that we had the rhythm right, and she is very musical.
Hmm.
And ultimately, we had a real, soprano do it. But when we were shooting, she did the Faust, the Jules song, and she did those, and she was pretty good. Of course, you can't really do an opera movie without it kind of being perfect, so
Yeah.
we did replace it, but I really like what she brought musically to it.
Hmm.
But I just think that movie is very, very original. And people can love it or hate it or whatever, but it's a very unique take on that. And Robert's great in it.
Yeah. Oh, he definitely is. And Jill, like you said, and yeah, just an interesting take on an iconic character. And yeah, it's considered a classic now, a genre classic,
I
and
know.
it's a fan favorite.
So I've outlived all my critics. It's
That's what it is. That's what happens, I guess. You stick around long enough,
that's
and
the
yeah, you outlive the
oh,
critics.
yeah.
I guess that's what it is. Another one I wanted to just touch on, at least for a minute, and you've mentioned it already, is Rapid Fire with, of course, the late great Brandon Lee, and he's been on my mind, a lot of people's mind lately. I don't know if you know, but there's a remake of The Crow coming out
Of
this
course,
year,
sure,
and
sure.
this is the 30th anniversary of all of that, and so I just love to hear a little bit about working with him. I'm obviously a huge fan, and it was a tragic loss.
Well, there's a documentary coming out very soon that I'm in a little bit about
Okay.
Brandon. And I guess the thing to remember about him is he wanted to embrace his father and his father's legacy, but he didn't want to use, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. He didn't want to use it.
Hmm.
In other words, he didn't want to just exploit it.
Yeah.
He wanted to become his own person. He was in great reverence of his father, so it wasn't like fuck dad, there was none of that. But at the same time, he was very clear to 20th Century Fox, you cannot, I won't do this movie. You cannot use my father's name in the marketing. So the poster can't say son of Bruce Lee.
Hmm.
Yeah, I won't let you do it, and if you're willing to make a movie that says Brandon Lee, Powers Booth, Rapid Fire, I'll make that. And then knowing that in every interview and every marketing and every press junket is going
Sure.
to come up.
Yeah.
So the Bruce Lee part's going to get out there, but he didn't want it to be, the lead in the,
Hmm.
the promotion. So that's one thing. He was also hell bent on becoming a really good actor. He knew he was a great, not great, but he was becoming a great martial artist. He
Hmm.
had trained, he was getting very, very good. I think I was the right director for him at that time because I do consider myself an actor's director. And I think I was able to take what was then basically an athlete um, and turn him into an actor. And he has scenes in Rapid Fire that are quite good, just performance wise. But I really worked with him more than I would work with, like, you know, Donald Pleasance. You don't, Brandon Lee it's a different thing.
Hmm.
So he needs, guidance. And when you're with if you're directing Alan Alda, you don't need a lot. I mean, these guys
Yeah.
they're who they are, and they're who they are for a reason. So I will say he was competitive,
Hmm.
almost ferociously competitive.
Yeah.
He was a little bit reckless with his motorcycle, and I don't know, he did have a kind of a wild side about
Yeah.
him, but he wanted to be a Hollywood star, and I think he would have been. He was well
Hmm.
on his way. Obviously, The Crow would have cemented that.
Sure.
He would have been, and mention this, but he would have been in every Marvel or DC movie ever made, right? They'd make it. He would do 20 of those because a handsome Asian martial artist with a legacy name. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So nothing, nothing but great energy to put towards Brandon. I spend quite a bit of time in the book discussing how he was shot, my
Yeah.
knowledge of what happened on the set of The Crow. And I don't know everything, but I have some insider information about it. And he, it's a life cut short.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely tragic, and yeah, like you said, he had such a future ahead of him. He was just getting going, and yeah, the Crow, like you just said, it would have cemented his place and really just launched him, you know, so much higher than and now it's just, it's that legacy, and unfortunately it's so similar to kind of his father's legacy, and just a wild story and so
It's a
tragic.
wild story.
But I do love hearing that perspective of him and how he was, so set that, yeah, we're not going to cash in on Bruce Lee's name, and we're not. And I really like that about him, and love hearing that.
Yeah, because it took, I'm sure, a lot of, cojones for him to stand up to the studio as a very young man
Yeah.
and say, if you want me, you're going to have to do it without just cashing in on my father's name. I mean, most people would say, yeah, I just do whatever you have to do. I just
Right.
want to be in this movie.
Right. Um, Well, now I want to fast forward a little bit. And I know we're skipping over a ton of awesome work and projects, but if we touch on all of them, we're going to be here all day. But I do want to talk about your latest film that came out last year, which I love. It's called Natty Knocks. And our regular viewers know about it. I've talked about it quite a bit. And I had your two leading ladies on here last year, Charlotte and Hannah, and they're awesome, and it was a great time talking to them. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about how this project came to you.
Well, it's first of all, thank you for talking about this movie. It's very similar, I think, in its trajectory to something like Phantom.
Yeah.
There was an initial perception because of Robert and Bill and Danielle that that we were going to have a certain Chainsaw Massacre quality to this thing because of what they're all known for. And you put the three of them together in a movie, and I think that there was a disappointment, and I understand it, that this was much more of a throwback, 80s
Yeah.
movie
Sure.
to a kid's adventure with scares, and so something that if you're 13, you're hanging out with your friends, and you watch this on Hulu with some popcorn, you're going to have a great time.
Yeah.
There's a little Disturbia in it. There's a little Goonies in it. But it's not, it's not a gore fest. It's
Right.
just, it's more of a thriller. And I hope that as time goes by, and this comes out on Halloween and whatever, that people give this movie a second chance, because Charlotte is fantastic in it, who plays, the babysitter.
Yeah.
And the kids, Hannah and Noah, and the care. What got me interested in this was Bill Moseley's character, because here's a guy who was traumatized by his mother's prostituting activities, watched her get killed, who happened to be a Scream Queen B-movie horror actress, and he sits in his basement and watches her old movies. I thought, that's creepy. Like that, and I haven't seen, I mean, I've seen a lot, but I haven't seen that. And Bill Moseley played that without a word of dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's so creepy. And I think, I mean, Robert was really what I call the sort of the John Houseman character, who comes in and he gives you the backstory of the town, and he gives his gravitas to the story. He's so great. I mean, he's just that, But then, of course, he does get killed, so which is great. It
Yes.
was great to have Chop Top killing Freddy.
Yeah, totally. I love it.
Yeah, that was kind of fun. But I think um, there's something about Charlotte because she's so knowing and yet innocent. I always am intrigued by that combination. Someone who's knowing, but then you realize, oh shit, they're way more savvy
Right.
than you think they are.
Hmm.
And the way she is with her boyfriend, and
Yeah.
how at the end she sort of finds her way. I don't know. I thought that was great. But Bill Moseley as a cop in a town who's the son of a 70s, like those movies like Maniac Cop and all
Hmm.
those kinds of
Yeah.
movies. So that, and then we had great fun because we had to go and shoot the footage that he's watching of his mother's
Oh yeah.
movies. So you can imagine that was kind of a hoot. We did like weird seances, and we had a stalker with a mask, and this girl. So we shot little clips from her movies. That was kind of fun. So I think when people grow into this movie, they're going to be really entertained by it because I mean I haven't Bill Moseley's character is the standout, I think, of
Yeah.
why you should see this movie.
Hmm.
I mean, I
Yeah.
love the cast, and I love Danielle as the real estate mom.
She's great.
She's gone from Jamie to the real, and she nails it,
Yeah.
and totally believable. And there's a wonderful cameo from an actor named William Shockley who plays this town cop who pulls him over, and he's just creepy enough to be a great red herring. It's like,
Hmm.
wait a minute, who's this guy?
Hmm.
So I don't know. I feel like that movie is undiscovered. And I think that it will take time for people to find it
Hmm.
and say, hey, this wasn't from a studio, because it was a real indie movie.
Yeah.
It didn't have any studio backing. It didn't have any studio marketing. It just kind of landed, very small company called Vertical. So it didn't have any, push.
Yeah.
But this Halloween and the Halloween after, I think this thing will earn its place because it's an entertaining movie for sure.
Oh, totally. Like you said, I mean, I agree with everything you said, and I do think it will find its audience over time as it's streaming and people are searching for Halloween. It does take place around Halloween, if people didn't
Yeah,
know. And like a lot of people, yeah, I was initially attracted to it, like you said, by these icons: Robert Englund, Danielle Harris, Bill Moseley, and then of course your name. So
right.
I'm like, okay, this is cool. And then I read the plot, and I'm like, this sounds cool. It involves horror movies and Halloween. I mean, this is my wheelhouse. So then I go into it not really knowing much more than that. And like you said, I found it to be very much a throwback. It felt like a late 80s, 90s
It does, absolutely.
horror movie in a lot of ways, in good ways. And I was really pleasantly surprised and blown away by the young cast. I mean, your veterans, your genre icons, of course, they killed it as they always do, and they were fantastic, like I knew they would be. But I thought the whole rest of the cast was great, and with Charlotte especially. And I told her this. I mean, I think you might have discovered another major talent here. We talked about Danielle, but yeah, for all the reasons you've already said. I mean, I thought she just really knocked it out the park in that film.
I hope she gets some opportunities
Yeah,
because she's got whatever that little it thing is.
yeah,
I think she has it.
yeah, definitely. I felt it watching the film. And I do recommend it. And I think our audience, if they haven't seen it, they're going to be seeking it out after this interview. And definitely, like you said, around Halloween time, I think it'll each year
Yeah,
get
and
more and more fans probably.
just enjoy it for what it is, like
Yeah,
a throwback, not too gory, fun Halloween movie.
yeah,
If the expectation is that way, I think people will really enjoy it. It's like with Phantom. If you went to see Phantom expecting Gaston Leroux or Lloyd Webber
Right.
and the great opera stuff, and you're not going to get that. You're getting a Freddie horror movie.
Yeah.
So expectations, I think, have a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
And movies are marketed today where they take the most obvious thing to sell you,
Yeah.
and so people go to the movies being sold kind of what it isn't. And I think that's sometimes a mistake. It's better to sell the movie, and then the people that do go, are going to be the right audience. I mean, this happens a lot. I love this recent movie called Monkey Man. I don't know if you've seen that yet.
I've seen the trailer. I haven't seen
Yeah,
the film.
that's with Dev Patel, and it's a
Yeah.
real action movie, but they're not presenting it in a way to get people into the theater. And it's a shame because it's quite a good movie.
Hmm.
I just use that as an example. It's almost like they're trying to sell this Bruce Lee movie,
Yeah.
this Indian Bruce Lee movie, and it is that, but it's really a crime thriller,
Yeah.
and a really interesting one. So anyway, that's something we all deal with, is the marketing of movies.
Yeah, like you said, I guess you don't have but so much control over that.
No, you just don't.
Yeah. And the other thing is, with today, there's so much content out there, so many films being made, and just the streamers and everything. Sometimes great stuff comes out, and it does take a while because it gets lost in the shuffle, and then it takes an article or two, or reappraisal, or somebody to actually take the time to soak it in and say, hey, maybe if we approach this and give it its due. And I think, as we've said, Natty Knocks, yeah, it's a very fun movie, when you go into it knowing, and because it knows what it is. It
Right.
knows what it is. It's not
Right.
trying to be anything else. It's just, straight what it is. And I had a blast with it.
We don't tear off anybody's arms or
Right.
do anything like that. I do see this happening on Netflix now,
Yeah.
that in their queue, a
Yeah.
lot of their top movies are old movies from
Yep.
like 10, 15 years ago that were kind of not widely seen.
And now they're
But people come to them now. I mean, my stepson was in a movie called Little Things with Denzel Washington, and it came out and nothing happened with it, really, especially for a star like that.
Yeah.
But then it shows up on Netflix, and it's like people then are seeing it with different eyes. Like they're not paying $16, $17, $18 for the ticket with the popcorn and the parking and the,
That's
all
true.
they're at home. What's this? Oh, it's a new Denzel. And then they watch it and they like it. But there's a lot of movies that are, for some reason, they work on Netflix, but they're older titles.
Yeah.
And but they're good movies. So I don't know who does the programming over there, but it's interesting to me. I mean, to be honest, they're way better than the Netflix movies, all of them.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'll get myself in trouble, but I don't know why they can't make better movies. They have all the resources,
all the resources, all the money. Yeah, I mean, and the viewers now. But yeah, it is interesting to see what rises up from years past, like you said, in this streaming age, and what gets reappraisal, and what the horror sites are picking up. Hey, look at this forgotten gem from the 90s or the early 2000s that came out, kind of came and went at the time, and now all of a sudden it's getting this new fandom or reappraisal sometimes. You do see that a lot more now. I guess it's just a product of the streaming age we're in now too.
It's
Maybe.
good. In many ways, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. With Natty Knocks, is there any chance we might see a sequel? Because I mean, no spoilers, but I mean, it was like it could go. There, it's open for more.
Well, especially the way Charlotte played her
Yeah.
possession at the end. She did.
I love it.
She did a great job. I will have to see. It's gonna, in order for that to happen, it's gonna have to catch a little bit of a wave so that we know that there's interest in it.
Yeah.
So I don't see it right on the immediate horizon, but it was certainly kind of teed up for that a little bit.
Yeah.
So we'll have to wait and see. I'm writing a kind of a horror thriller now, um,
Yeah.
and it's very intriguing to me because I'm trying to balance my sensibility and love of movies. Like
Mhm.
I love movies like, do you remember The Changeling with George C.
Yeah.
Scott?
Hmm.
I mean, these movies they take their time a little bit, you
Yep.
know, they do unfold a little bit more, deliberately.
Hmm.
But there's when you get to the reveal and when you accumulate your suspense, they deliver in a good way. So I'm trying to
Yeah.
write this script that will be like an 18 or a 20-year-old will get it today, but just has that like tell the story kind of quality to it. We'll see how it goes. But
Well,
things change. Everything
yeah.
changes, as you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Everything, whatever can change will change. That's all we know for sure.
I think M. Night Shyamalan is coming out with something,
Yeah.
um,
He's got a new one.
and I don't know whether his particular, twist genre is still of the moment. I'm not sure.
Well, it's whatever, everything comes back around. I know that too. We always see that. Like whatever wasn't in favor yesterday, tomorrow it probably will be again. And everything comes back around in waves and nostalgia and all that. So but I was gonna ask you that, what current or upcoming projects you might have going on. But that's exciting that you're working on that script. Is there other current or upcoming projects you can talk to us about?
Well, I have an alien thriller I've been working on
Okay.
called Fast Walkers, and I have a company now trying to put it together. And it takes place. I'll tell you this much: it takes place right on the Mexican border, and we make a joke. It's sort of like the ultimate illegal aliens, because
Right.
because they actually are aliens.
Right.
But it's got a lot of Project Blue Book kind of mythology in it, because
Yeah, yeah.
well, there's definitely the Air Force underground on that side of the border, and it's a bunch of kind of blogger kids who go down to kind of do what do they call it? It's like freelance journalism on the border because they're reporting on all the problems we're having down there.
Yeah.
Um, but they start to realize that there's a lot more happening and that there's actually these freaking quiet place aliens down there. And one thing that's happened since the script was finished is that the politics at the border have, like, talk about change. I mean, when this was written, when it wasn't that long ago, but there were people coming over, and you'd see migrant families coming across the Rio Grande, and it was all you try to help who you could or whatever. But it wasn't this like wave of humanity.
Yeah.
So I don't know now what if we do get the money, we're going to have to make some adjustments for the current because I mean, I've had my eye on it because I've
Hmm.
been working on this. It's like, man, it's not the same. It's not a political issue. It's just not the same.
Yeah.
It's not people who are in hard times who escape over and blah blah blah. It's tens of thousands of people.
Yeah.
So maybe it's too political for a horror movie, but it's scary because you don't really know who's who. And so it taps into what do they say, the zeitgeist a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it would tap into a lot going on in the real world in a scary way and as we
Right.
like in horror, I mean, there's always that social commentary in the best horror movies, I
Well,
think.
Carpenter did it
Yeah.
big time, with what's his glasses alien movie,
They live.
They Live,
Yep.
he's always done the social commentary.
Yep.
And a lot of a lot of horror gets into contemporary, sort of issues for sure.
Definitely.
So those are what I'm really focused on. I've written. I'm about 70 pages into the script. I'm pretty happy with it, but I think to me now, I need to focus on the writing,
Yeah.
so that I can, control my destiny a little bit as the landscape changes.
Mhm.
And I do really want to promote my book because
Yeah.
I have so many questions come to me from filmmakers, young filmmakers, students
Yeah.
who have so many of the questions that you've asked about today. And it's on, first of all, I have a website, dwightlittleddirected.com, but also if you just go on Amazon and look up Still Rolling Inside the Hollywood Dream Factory, it's an easy, or McFarland, it's around.
Okay.
And I do think we got a great review in Kirkus. And I think this is a book I want people to read who are interested in the very kinds of things you've been talking about.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm gonna check it out, and yeah, I'm sure a lot of our audience will. And like I said, I'll be sure to put a link to it in this article in the description of this interview for sure.
So, okay, well, I'm going to get in trouble if I don't wrap this up here.
I
Uh,
hear you.
is
This
there any other one pressing question you didn't get to?
I think we probably covered everything I've got for now. Again, I could go on and talk about other projects, but yeah, those were the main points I wanted to hit on, and yeah, definitely going to be checking out your book. And I just can't thank you enough for hanging out and sharing all of this with us. This has just been a pleasure today talking to
Great.
you and hearing all these stories from these sets. I mean, just some of my favorite films. So this has just been awesome.
There's been a lot of film and television over the years.
Yes.
I mean, I'll tell you, my favorite TV show is an off-brand show that my son has this expression called "slept on." I don't know
Yeah. Yeah.
if you know this expression. It means kind of forgotten or passed over.
Uh-huh.
He's a senior. He's just graduating this year from Emerson.
Oh,
So
cool.
he's studying film as well. But
Awesome.
so this TV series was kind of slept on. It was called Sleepy Hollow. Do you
Oh,
remember
I do remember that.
Sleepy
Yeah.
Hollow?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it was kind of this colonial guy who comes into modern times. But we had a lot of creatures, a lot of horror elements, big horror elements in that show. And the lead was a guy named Tom Meissen, an English actor, who I just, thought the world of. But sometimes you get on, and of course I did a lot of horror with Dusk Till Dawn, the Robert
Oh,
Rodriguez.
yes. Yes.
I did 4 or 5 of those episodes, and we did all kinds of vampire shit on
I
that
love that.
show. So I've been able to do some horror stuff in television, particularly Sleepy Hollow and Dusk Till Dawn.
That's still done. Yeah. Yeah, I do remember well, Dust Till Dawn I've seen all of, and I love that. And I remember Sleepy Hollow watching some of that. Yeah, I need to go back and rewatch some of that. Because I think I did sleep on it after a while. I need to go back and maybe check it out
Well,
and
Dusk Till
rewatch it.
Dawn is much more of a horror vampire thing.
Yeah, now that one I loved yeah, that one I devoured.
Yeah, we had a great cast. So anyway, thanks for having me on, and good luck editing this.
this is this has been awesome. It's been a total pleasure. You've been great. And instead of saying goodbye, since every day's Halloween, we always hate to say goodbye. Instead, I just always say Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, and we'll see you again around Halloween, maybe.